Yeah. So, I think podcasts have been a huge thing. Obviously, there's social media, getting on more stages. So September, October, November, lots of different speaking engagements. September 27th, I'm in Hamilton at a big event, and the book will have gone live then, and we're selling from the back of the room. So it'll be really cool to be able to be in front of this large group of urban planners, actually, and giving this book back to them as just a hallmark of gratitude as well. Some television segments as well, too. So yeah, lots of little things, but everyone keeps asking, are you going to have a launch party? And I think, you know what? I think lots of podcasts is my makeshift launch party. And who knows, I'm sure we'll have something more in the community here, but one step at a time for sure.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I don't get to say this often, but the doctor will see us now. I'm excited. Dr. Shahana is on with us, and we're going to be talking to her about her new book that's coming out in September. She has been on television. She's done a great TEDx talk as well. Lots of great stuff on her website, which we'll include in the show notes. Go over there and check it out. But I'm really excited to have a fellow Canadian here with me today, and excited to see where our conversation goes. Dr. Shahana, nice to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, my goodness. No, I am so thrilled to be here. It's such a privilege, and just can't wait to talk about all things feel better and just hopefully share some nuggets that will help you along the way.
Excellent. I was hoping at some point we could actually stretch this joy part of our life, maybe joy stretch a little bit. We'll get into that, right? See how I'm trying to do that? Play at the seat.
I love
let's stretch all this out into our conversation. I love this. Tell everybody, Dr. Shahana, where are you in this big world of ours?
Yes, I'm in Abbotsford, British Columbia, about an hour away from Vancouver. Most people know Vancouver, British Columbia. So sometimes I'll say I'm in Vancouver, but I'm really not. I'm an hour away from there too. But it's a beautiful part, great place to raise a family, and did medical school at UBC, came back and did residency from where I'm from in Abbotsford. And I live literally next door to my parents, which is great when you've got 3 young boys.
Wow, great. Awesome. Well, that's nice to know. Talk a little bit about your background. I know you did a TEDx talk. Talk a little bit about that. That seems to be like this pinnacle for many people to get up on stage with that big TEDx logo behind you. But tell us about that experience.
Yeah. It somehow has become that hallmark, or just something I think that speakers are craving to do and to kind of get onto that stage. Ironically enough, for me, it was, I say back in 2019, but that was still a number of years ago. It was 3 months after the birth of my 3rd son. And that was the first stage I ever got on. I had never spoken before then, but I pitched them an idea. I think I was still in my postpartum delirium of some sort. And I thought, this sounds like a great idea. Why not just try this? And then I really started to panic when I got accepted, because I had to do something about this. I remember trying to nurse my baby and rehearse my speech at the same time, which I don't advise it as well. But no, it was a really interesting, unique opportunity. I think one of the key points is that you get paired. I'm sure a lot of TED stages do this. You get paired with a speaker's coach. So we had one, and it was a very humbling process to get told, yeah, this is not sounding so good, or you need to work on this. And although, yes, I've been in school for a long period of time, it was a long time since I had received feedback, like true feedback. And I think you have to have a certain amount of courage, grace, and humility to properly receive that feedback. So that was very important, because I think, although I might know a lot about medicine, I knew very little about the speaking world. So I was really starting in preschool when it came to be a speaker, and trying to work my way up of how to be on a stage, how to have a good stage presence, how to deliver a talk in such a short amount of time that really lands with the audience. So all of those things were great
opportunities for me. Talk a little bit about your cornerstone of your practice and what you do with your medical degree. Tell us a little bit about who you serve.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting, because when you say medicine, most people have a pretty good idea of, what's involved in going to see a doctor. I never thought I would choose this stream, which is helping adolescents. I work in a full service family practice. I do the typical family practice, but most of my time is spent being the medical director of British Columbia's largest youth health center. We see 500 new patients a month between the ages of 12 and 24. So we see everything. It's not just mental health. It's not just sexual health. We see everything from a headache to an ingrown toenail. But at the end of the day, it is a lot of mental health. And I love working with this population because this is often the forgotten population, right? We as adults can get ourselves to the doctor. Most of us will take our kids to the doctor, but that adolescent time period can be like, you're fine, right? You're okay, right? And they're not. They're not okay. So this becomes a catch-all for them to come to see a counselor, to see a social worker, we have a food bank right there. We have a kind of a clothing drive right there where they can come and access clothing, food. So it is more than just here's a prescription. It's full body care.
And that's the one thing I love when I meet someone like you that's not just focused on the end and let's give you a prescription, but let's get to the root. Let's get to the reason, right? Let's go back to that point and maybe we can solve it at the beginning before we see you at the end, right?
I can't even. Just last week, actually, I was seeing a patient and she presented with what later turned out to be quite a serious physical health condition. But when I just asked her a simple question, I said, who right now do you have in your corner who is supporting you, not financially, but just emotionally, mentally? And she kind of looked at me and she said, I'm homeless right now. I don't have a fixed address. I said, well, where actually are you living? And this is a 20-year-old female. And she's like, I'm living in my car. I've been living in my car for the last couple of weeks. And suddenly everything that we had been talking about fell to the wayside, right? Like this social issue was obviously probably causing some of the physical and mental health condition. But if I hadn't asked that question, she wasn't going to volunteer the information because you could see how much shame was in that answer that I'm living out of my car. I am technically homeless right now. So that is what I love about working at this clinic. And I told her, I said, lean on us. Like we have a navigator here. We have someone that can help at least direct you to the right supports. And I think it takes humility as a physician to go, I can't solve all of your problems here, but I can point you in the right direction, right?
Yeah. And that's the community aspect of all of this, right? Yeah. You can do so much on your own. You have knowledge and expertise that I don't have. So you can serve people that I can't serve. But there's something that I can do through clothing drives or food drives. I can still participate at a different level, maybe, or a different area, but we're all working together.
And sometimes all community needs is a hub, right? We all want to pull together. We just don't know how. So when you create this hub, now suddenly we have the vehicle that we can pull together and we're all moving in the same direction. So yeah, that's where my heart is. You can even tell when I'm talking about it. I love speaking about this kind of work. And I think what's really interesting, we've seen this journey with so many even really well-known authors. Take Susan Cain, the author of Quiet. She started her career by being a lawyer. Gretchen Rubin, who wrote a famous book on happiness, was also, I believe, a lawyer too. Like a lot of these people have had these careers because you feel like you've been through the ringer in terms of school. You must get out and practice what you have been taught. And I think it's important to color outside the lines, like yes, I'm a physician, but I also love speaking and I also love writing. So give yourself a little bit of that leeway to find out what brings that creativeness to you if you can't necessarily find it in the profession that you've spent decades trying to attain.
Okay, so if you're coloring outside the lines, what are some of your favorite colors and what do they represent for you? Like, what tools are you using to color outside the lines?
You know what it is? It's creativity. I have this paradox of creativity that I think a lot about because growing up, I was not an artistic person. I'm not the type of person who can take paint to paper and just create something beautiful. I'm not an actor. I'm not a musician. I don't fall into the typical creative, quotients. But yet with writing and speaking, there's something so beautiful that I can take an idea, an analogy in my head and communicate it. I call it word art, like through language. I think with a lot of these professions, I'll say law, medicine, the list goes on and on. We are so linear. We are so black and white. We're kind of practicing in this box. In medicine, it's don't kill anybody. Keep everybody safe, which is a good premise to have, of course. But there's a lot of fear when you practice in that box. They call it the science and the art of medicine. I'm sure as I get older, I'll start to practice the art. But at this point in time, speaking allows me the art. So that's how I color outside the lines, by embracing my definition of what creativity is, which is it's okay to fail and it's okay to make a mistake. And actually, it's actually a good thing that you don't know what you're doing next. Whereas medicine has to be so strategic, so planned, so algorithmic based. Creativity is not like that. So it's been a freedom for me to discover this.
Yeah, it's like a different hat that you have to put on almost in a different context to kind of leverage them both. But there is some interplay between them as well at the same time,
Yes.
right? But you have to kind of be conscious of, well, where am I right now? Where am I most effective? And how can I show up? Yeah.
Exactly. Like a person who's in a lot of pain might not want to hear my analogy about the emotional bed. Like it might not be the right time to talk to them about that.
Right.
But this is, you know, I think sometimes it can feel like in these professions, you're walking a tightrope. Like you're just so like, okay, do we check this? Do we check that? Ask any doctor. One of the worst things is, did you make a bad call? Did you make a mistake? Did you miss that? Right. And I think in creativity, there's nothing to miss because everything is open to you about that. So I think just that freedom of play is, I know for myself, was missing for decades. And now having found this again, if I can find it through words, I think you can find it through any medium.
So where does the idea of taking all of this amazing knowledge and practical expertise with your community and then saying, I need to write a book about this? Like, where does all that kind of fit into all this?
You know what? During COVID, after I gave the TEDx talk, it was the end of 2019, 2020 began. And then, COVID started and I fell in love with speaking, but suddenly there was no stage to speak on. But in some ways that was a blessing because podcasts were still alive and well. And it was my chance to hone my craft and to develop the stories and develop the analogies. And it wasn't until going on the Anxiety at Work podcast that I met New York Times bestselling author Adrian Gostick, who wrote The Carrot Principle. And he was the one who said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, yeah, but I have 3 kids. Like there's always going to be the but, right? There's always an excuse. And I think it turned out that when you want to do anything that seems unachievable, like run a marathon, for example, you need a good mentor, right? You need someone who's going to hopefully guide you through the process. And you need a great connector, right? Somebody that's actually going to connect you with a whole bunch of people. Yeah. So in Adrian and his son, I found 2 of those, actually 3 of those things. Adrian became my mentor. His son helped guide me through the process and held me accountable, right? So he was lovely to work with. And it was just this process of going, have you written this chapter? Because night before would come, I haven't written anything, but I knew I had a deadline that I had to get to. And it wasn't for me, it was for them, right? And because I look up to them, because of their incredible work, I felt like I would be falling short if I didn't at least try to put pen to paper, right? So I think that accountability was huge. And then they were able to connect me with the right people when the time came to get testimonials and endorsements for the book. So I wasn't walking on this journey alone too. So it sounds really simple to say, I had an idea and I wrote a book. Well, no, that's not how it happened. It happened with a lot of help, a lot of guidance, a lot of mentorship, and a lot of accountability.
How do those testimonials verify for you that you're on the right path?
Sometimes you can have a testimonial from someone who's incredibly esteemed and has done great work. And don't get me wrong, I love those testimonials. But sometimes I wonder, are they written by that person or by their team? Because there's usually a team behind all of these incredible people. The best feedback for me is when I gave it to a girlfriend of mine, or when I gave it to a friend of a friend who was going through a hard time. And the best thing that they told me is that I can't wait I know who I need to share this with.
Nice.
My sister-in-law is going through a hard time. That's real, right? So I think those people haven't written books, they haven't gotten any awards, but I actually value their feedback a lot more because that's real life.
Mm-hmm. That's very astute of you to make that qualification. I think, when we look at those reviews, we're like, as readers, we're like, I don't know how this happens, like how you get all these amazing reviews, and like we don't understand what goes behind the scenes. The book is not even out, and all these people are loving it. We're like, how does that even happen? Like, we're like waiting, like we feel like we're missing out on something because we haven't read it yet, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think, and connections breed connections, right? So I think getting in touch with people who really value their craft and value their art, hopefully they will lead you to better people. I've learned the hard way that this is less about the money you spend and more about the relationships. Like actually like when I met Adrian and his amazing son too, I was like, I could be going for a cup of coffee. I've never ever met them face to face. We've only met virtually. And yet I've had this incredible relationship with them. So that is the true perk, even this, right, of social media, of connecting with like-minded people and actually caring enough to not just have a great call, but then 6 months later to say, hey, I'm just thinking about you. How is such and such going? Right? That is the power of good relationships.
Yeah. And I love podcasting for that because A, I have time in your calendar, which I probably shouldn't have time in your calendar today. You're a very busy person, but you're making time for this, and I really do appreciate it. But you get to talk to great people, meet great people, and then you can make connections behind the scenes as well. I'm like, oh, you need to meet this person, and oh, you need to meet this person, and your community grows in this, and I love that.
Yes, yeah. Speakers always ask me, like, how do you get referrals? I'm like, the best way to get referrals is to give referrals. That's the best way. You want more business? You give other people business. Because, and not in such a strategic, like, well, you owe me one. It's not like that. It's just that I'm actually start to really professionalize the art of referral giving, like care enough about it that when you think, there's this friend of mine and she keeps telling me, she's like, why do you keep sending me all this stuff? She's like, how do I pay it back? I'm like, the universe, it like literally is just always coming, and this opportunity is perfect for you. It's not perfect for me, but for you. So I'll just keep being the connector. And somewhere along the line, it does come back to you. So start to think about making that process as seamless as possible and actually putting some effort and time into making those referrals, because somewhere along the way, at some point in time, it will come back to you.
Okay, so you've written the book. It's coming out in September. Anxiously awaiting this. How are you different as a person through the process of writing your own book?
I'm free. You know why? I hate reading. This is why that's really bad to say this, but as I'm sure you'll have authors say this, because you've read it in different chunks, and when you have to keep rereading it, sometimes I want to do anything but like I want to paint my wall, then read my book again, because it's like I don't want to go back and notice any errors or feel like this thing that I've brought to life has any mistakes in it, which I'm sure it does too. So I was rereading it for the umpteenth time today. And there was a phrase in there, and I go into my story about how I struggled with postpartum OCD and anxiety and suicidality and all the things. And I'm thinking, oh my word, like I'm not going to be the only one reading this. Like everyone is going to be reading this. And instead of feeling scared, which I felt scared since I was 4 years old and started struggling with mental health issues, I felt for the first time free. I was like, you know what? Great. Because now I don't have to live with that shame anymore. And now what is the worst that can happen? It's on paper. I've talked about it on podcasts. I've stood in front of hundreds of people and talked about it. It's way harder to talk to my own family about it, but to other people, I can do it. So I think that freedom I'm looking forward to that. And I can already see that it's coming too. I don't need to hide behind the words anxiety and depression, because let's say that those are a lot safer to say. Oh, I had some panic attacks. I was a bit depressed. Luckily, after COVID, those are a lot easier to say out loud. You use words like OCD and suicidality, people take a big step back. It's too much. But I had to be honest because I kept hiding behind the wrong things. So I think for a big, big part of me, it's putting my story to paper, putting context behind it, and using it to help other people. And what more could I want than that?
And your book's coming out in September, which is also a month where we focus on giving people the tools and support to deal with the mental health crisis they're dealing with right now. And so that's timely, I think, that your book would come out at that point as well.
Yeah. It's been ready for quite some time. And now watch me rushing towards the end when I say that, right? So at least I think it's ready. But I just didn't feel like releasing a book in the middle of June or July was the best time period for it. It's called Feel Better. I can feel the September anxiety. And my husband and I were talking about this too. I'm like, we need a whiteboard. We need a calendar. Like the kids have outgrown their pants. Like it can start to feel that creeping in of the hockey equipment. Like, where is it now? Like we've been laissez-faire over the summertime. And if I'm feeling that angst, I know a lot of parents that back to school, as the commercials come, so does my anxiety. So I think it's a good time to release it because I need that reminder as much as everyone else does.
The moment I hear a back to school commercial in July, I'm like, come on, people. Can we just enjoy the summer for a little bit, please? Come
I
on.
don't want to think about pencil cases and
No.
lunchboxes right now. Exactly.
No, I want to enjoy summer. I want to sit out on the bench on the porch and just have my coffee and no.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So the book's coming out in September. What's the launch date for the book?
September 26th.
There you go. So what else are you doing besides being on podcasts and all of that great stuff to help promote the book?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think podcasts have been a huge thing. Obviously, there's social media, getting on more stages. So September, October, November, lots of different speaking engagements. September 27th, I'm in Hamilton at a big event, and the book will have gone live then, and we're selling from the back of the room. So it'll be really cool to be able to be in front of this large group of urban planners, actually, and giving this book back to them as just a hallmark of gratitude as well. Some television segments as well, too. So yeah, lots of little things, but everyone keeps asking, are you going to have a launch party? And I think, you know what? Like, I think lots of podcasts is my makeshift launch party. And who knows, I'm sure we'll have something more in the community here, but one step at a time for sure.
Now, we kind of teased it at the beginning about stretching our joy. This isn't a yoga class, but how are you stretching your joy? What can you tell us a little bit about what's happening for you?
Now I can only picture downward dog, cobra, stuff like that. So the foreshadowing was great too. So, the book, all of this, I call it me search, right? Like I was doing it selfishly enough to help me. And I shared very openly and honestly that I have and was struggling for a long period of time. And when you have 3 young boys, there's lots of fodder that you need to figure out how to control your emotions. One technique that I've kept coming back to over and over again was bred from the idea of, and I think all of our kids have done this, and maybe you've done it yourself, where you take that gum out of your mouth and you stretch it, right? We've all seen kids do that. Yeah. My middle son decided that would be the point that he'd stick it in his hair. Good. So don't do that, obviously. But the gum stretching, and it just brought to this attention for me that what if we could treat joy the same way? So go with me on this for a second. Your child comes home from school, and I use children because a lot of us here might be listening, our parents, but you could substitute that for your pet or your partner. They come home from work and you embrace them in a hug, right? That probably lasts, a second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. And then you're probably not even present during the hug. I know I'm not. I'm thinking about what I have to make for dinner. Did I start the laundry? Do I need to hang the clothes up from the dryer? Like all the different things. So instead of letting your mind wander, you capture that moment in time, a moment that would bring you joy. You freeze that moment, and then you sink into the 5 senses. So smell your child's hair, feel the sensation of your touch on their skin, right? You do all of the things to sink as if you're in quicksand, sinking into that moment by thinking of that piece of gum and stretching out for as long as you possibly can. And this is important because those types of memories are only logged into your short-term memory if you pay attention to them. If you deliberately pay attention, selective attention, then it gets inputted into your short-term memory. Otherwise, it's just in your working memory. Your working memory is like going to the grocery store. You need cilantro, milk, and cheese. So you keep repeating that to yourself until you get the cilantro, milk, and cheese. And then I ask you 2 days later, and you're like, I don't know what I had to go get. Like that's your working memory, right? So this joy stretching, the neurosciences, it just allows you to take a screenshot. We've all heard that click when you take a screenshot on your phone of that moment that's bringing you joy. And instead of counting for 5 seconds, you've now stretched it out because you've put it into your short-term memory. So this has saved me in so many aspects because it's brought my attention back to the present. There's a mindfulness component to it. But there's also this idea that you are logging this. We all know that if I take a picture of something, I'm pausing. I'm having to think about it. So I'm tired of letting life pass me by. I'm tired of being so distracted by not multi-tasking, but multi-thinking. I've got too many browser windows open all the time. So joy stretching allows me to pause, focus, and capture.
Well, I'm like, I want to give everyone a moment to do that as you're listening and go, hang on. Yeah, again, the smell of your kid's hair, even if they're sweaty from playing outside, you're just like, ugh, okay, I remember that smell. But just, they happen so quick and then they're gone, right? They're such throwaway moments. And there's a point when those moments won't happen anymore. I'm an empty nester. My kids are out of the house. They don't come around for hugs all the time. So, there's a point in your life where you got to kind of go, hang on, I really want to live this moment. I want this to matter, right?
Completely. And it's so like I keep chasing and doing all of this stuff and everything out. It's just right in front of me, right? And yet you're just letting it go by. It's almost like if you've ever watched I Love Lucy and she was taking the chocolates out of the right.
Yeah.
That's how it feels, right? And the conveyor belt just keeps going faster until you go, no, this is my way to pause it or slow it down a little bit too. So, yeah, I hope that helps. And I know that it's made a big difference in my life, which is why, like anything, when you feel like it impacts you, the first thing you want to do is to go, maybe it'll impact someone else out there.
So for the reader that's going to grab the book in September before they open the book, first time, they're sitting in their lap, they have their coffee or tea, they're ready to read your book, sit down and enjoy this. But before they open the cover, what's your love letter to them? What do you want them to know before they read a single word?
I want them to know that they're acknowledging themselves precedes self-awareness. I want them to know that if they get nothing else out of the book, it's allowing them to love themselves for where they are at in the present time, right? That all of that is the foundation for self-compassion, which has gotten so much attention lately. But I think we talk too much about self-awareness and too little about self-acknowledgement. So that's what I want them to get out of it.
The name of my podcast is Living the Next Chapter, so I have to kind of ask this. The book is done. It's getting ready. It's going to be out in the world soon. Have you had any moments of contemplation now that the book is finished where you're like, I have a new thought. I have an additional thought. I have something deeper that I'd love to talk about that's not in the book. But I have this thought I don't know what to deal with. It's kind of like my next chapter after the book. Are you dealing with any of that as you finalize a book? Is it really ever final? Really?
That's what the publisher told me. He's like, if you keep putting your new ideas in, you will never be done.
Right.
I kept saying, no, but what about this? And what about I learned this and I need to do this? And he's like, no, like you must stop, right? So I parked that in. I've created fictitious chapter 8s, chapter 9s. It only goes to chapter 7. But, I've just kept creating that over and over again, too. So I think there's always something more. And I think out of all of this, I've discovered that I do love to write. You'll be the judge if I'm any good at it or not. But I think there is another book in there somewhere, whether it be for the world or just for me.
Yeah, because I think that's something we always deal with, those thoughts after the fact. And I'm always curious to know if there's something that the readers would benefit from, that you've had new insight after the book's been written. You're like, oh, I'd love to tell the audience about this, right? Because there's always new things you're going to come across all the time. Right?
I'll be honest, like joy stretching is nowhere in the book.
Yeah.
Didn't make it into the book. It came out afterwards in my head. So, but that's why I'm so excited. And maybe that's the good thing about social media is that you can keep sharing some of these ideas and testing the lay of the land to go, does it land? Does it not land? Is there something here? So,
okay. Talk us through your website as well. I want to send people to you. Like, is there a main hub, a main thing that you want us to focus on when we come to your website for the first time?
So there's a page called the Optimal Health Pyramid, and that's in the book as well, too. It's just a framework and an assessment tool that you can use to go take a step back and where am I at in my life? And I created this on the back of a napkin when I was in some of my darkest times because I thought, I've studied medicine, I've studied nutrition, kinesiology. Like, how did I literally end up on the floor of a psychiatrist's office? Like, something does not match here. So, and the reason is that I spent all my time in the meat of the pyramid. I was exercising a ton. I was watching exactly what I ate. I slept fine with the baby, as fine as you can get, but I completely neglected the foundation. I had zero social connections. It was just me, my husband, and my child, like my baby. I had let go of a lot of my friendships because it was just hunker down, survive. And I completely neglected this, that you need to understand what your emotions are trying to tell you. You need to try to train your brain. You need to have some semblance of self-awareness And you need to start to understand what armor you're constantly using to defend yourself against the world. Nobody had ever talked about those types of concept in medicine, kinesiology, nutrition. And at the top part of the pyramid is, why are we doing all this in the first place? The phrase shouldn't be it's time to go to work. It's time to serve. So who are you serving today? Right? That's what we need to tell our kids. It's not, hey guys, mommy's going to work. No, mommy's going to serve. Whether you're a custodian, a barista, at the back of a cash register, it doesn't matter. You are going to serve someone, someplace, somewhere. So I think that is the pyramid in a nutshell. So I often tell employers that forget asking your staff, like, how are you? Well, how are you? Just get them to do the optimal health pyramid, because they're going to say everything is the 4-letter word of our society, which is fine. No, you're not fine. But you'll see a dip off of their social connections are going down. Their sleep is going down. Their eating habits are going up in the wrong way, right? So you can start to use these quote unquote soft markers to go, there's an unearthing of something, and that is an indication. So I do it. I just score myself every month and I go, okay, I really need to work on reaching out to people, social connections, and because I'm a big introvert, which you might not sense over here, but I definitely am. So over camera, I'm okay, but in person, maybe not. So yeah, I think that's if you can, there's lots of this podcast, there's so many different things on the website, but I'm want to give you a tool that will help you. And that's where the optimal health pyramid, and you can take the quiz and you get a bit of an assessment tool. So it's cool to use. Excellent.
And then all the information for the book is there as well. So we can watch all that and be a part of that. There's a lot of great information here. Yes. And then I guess we can also go out and check out the TEDx talk as well, and see you up on stage in all your glory in the moment. And it's kind of nice to hear the background story of that talk as well, because it looks so polished and so perfect, and everyone's so well behaved. And you're like, oh, behind the scenes, complete meltdown.
No. All I remember is I had to get off the stage, and my little one, like I said, it was 3 months, and he didn't care. Like, he needed to be nursed right there and then. So it just snaps you back to reality. That, no, like, I need my food right now.
Yeah,
so
we're done.
It's good. I've got tons of videos, hopefully, that are helpful on YouTube as well, that are just very similar to the joy stretching, just different types of concepts that I've come up with that maybe will land with you, and hopefully that will stick in your head. So check those out as well.
And I see you do a lot of speaking and helping of different organizations as well. As a speaker coming to an event, what kind of events do you love to do? Who can hire you out to come out and speak to the organization?
Yeah, no, thanks for even asking that too. I've spoken to everybody from accountants to females in aerospace, to dentists, to lawyers, to tons of non-for-profits. I'll speak to anybody. And the reason is, the premise of when I speak is that I speak to the person behind the profession. I treat every single audience member as if I've taken them into my clinic, closed the door, and said, what do you need right now? And then tried to devise a keynote based on that premise. So it's less about, let's look at top line productivity or leadership. No, it's like, let's think about if every single person, what are you wishing that someone knew about you and you needed to hear right now? That's a kind of keynote. So yes, it's framed under the pretense of mental and emotional health, but it's so much more than that, because they are finally getting seen and heard, and not just feeling like they're being bombarded with things that are so much based on outcomes rather than the person that they are right now.
Excellent. And the one other thing I wanted to highlight on your website is your newsletter as well. Can you kind of talk us through that as we sign up for the Feel Better newsletter? That actually rhymes, which I love. But tell us more about what we're going to receive in our inbox by subscribing.
Yeah, I call it the wins. With every 2 weeks for now, just a light sprinkling of information. And WIN is just an acronym, and it just basically all of it is like, what's new, like what I'm enjoying right now. And it could be something that I found on Amazon. It could be a cool exercise video. It's things that I want you to think about, the I, and then what's next, which is N. So 3, I need to always stop myself because I can write for a long period of time. So I'm trying to give you tangible things. And the best part is at the end, I spent way too much money designing this, so I really hope you enjoyed it. It's called Spin the Emotional Wheel. So the whole idea is, can we treat our emotions like a scavenger hunt? What if I told you that today you need to look out for joy, or today you need to look out for delight? if I preload you with that information, and if I say I'm going to give you $100 if you can name 3 ways you got delight today, you are going to go and you are going to be a scavenger hunt and find that. But if I didn't preload you, all of that delight is passing you by and you wouldn't have paid attention to it. So every 2 weeks, you spin the emotional wheel, it lands on an emotion, and that's what you have to look out for. Nostalgia, respect, delight, joy, the list goes on and on.
Okay. And maybe a future newsletter edition will include joy stretching is not a yoga pose. Maybe that'll end up there somewhere.
Yes, I think
okay.
so.
All right. I like that. Okay. So as we close off, again, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for making time to be on the podcast. I'm excited for your book. Excited for all the great things ahead for you. If we were able to have a sit down with you in your office, close the door, and have a moment with you to talk about our mental health, we're struggling a little bit today, and we just need some kind of inspiration to move forward. We're here with you in the office. It's just you and me. What could you say to us if we're struggling today, just to kind of show up and do life today? What would you say to us?
Yeah. I think it's less about what I say and more my action, right? I call it the nanosecond effect. I call it this idea that the minute that you've decided just even how you're describing it, there's a vulnerability there. There's a courage there. And I've been in the patient role, so I know what that feels like. But if your practitioner does this versus like literally kind of leans in and catches you and goes, I got you. I know. And our job is to figure out, is this just an adjustment reaction, which is in the DSM-5 criteria, which means you've had a breakup, you've lost your job, like, there's some kind of trigger for this, or is this a diagnosable mental health condition, or is this just an emotion, energy and motion that's going to come and go? That's my job to try to figure and suss that out, right? So I think for you, it's all you can do. I work in a lot of breast health as well. So I tell the women all the time that all you can do is tell me that you have pain or a lump or whatever the case. It's my job to go, is this something that we need to be concerned about? Not, or are we in middle ground? So I think it's more, I've learned it's less about what I say and how I say it and the action that I hold, because if I can get them to come back, if I can get them to trust me with their story, that's the hallmark of a good working relationship.
It's interesting because going back to what we talked about at the beginning, not just focusing on the prescription, but focusing on the source. I remember being a young student going into the emergency covered in welts, just having a breakout. And the doctor walked into the room, had his clipboard, looked at me. He's like, do you got an exam tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah. Are you stressed out about this exam? Yeah, I was really struggling about this. Well, that's the reason why you're here. I can give you a cream for your itch and all the welts, but you need to relax and calm down. You're going to be fine on your exam. You're a smart person. And that was it. And I'm like, hang on, what just happened here? That's the most interesting doctor encounter I've ever had in an emergency room, was just knowing why I was there. Was not just about what he could physically see, but what caused it. And I'm like, oh, that's what we need more of. I love that.
Yeah. So cool. No, I'd be hard pressed. Especially in an emergency room where it's more like, okay, here, go. That's the art. I think we talked about a little bit of
there you go.
Art, right? Yeah, there it is.
I love it. Cool. Awesome. Everyone, all the information for Dr. Shahana will be in the show notes as well. Please go and support this great new author. Go check out all the great stuff she has out there for you to check out. Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I feel so thrilled to have you here. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Can't wait for you to read it.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun. Well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.